Good morning, YouTube. Hey, we're gonna work on the Versys here a little today. Excuse me. Um, as I've probably mentioned before in some other videos, my wife really hasn't shown a lot of interest in riding on the street anymore since discovering dirt bikes, which I can't blame her. Um, riding on the road is considerably more hazardous now than it was even 5 or 6 years ago. Since COVID, I don't know, people just whatever. That's another video. But anyway, since I'm going to probably spend more time on this bike, I'm going to set it up to better suit me, my weight, and the possibilities of it seeing more off-road duty. So let's look at what I've done. I've added a couple of things other than lifting it back up to the normal height. I've added a few things, and I've got a few more things I want to add today. So let's take a look at those. Okay, we got the 2022 Versys 300X here, or is it Versys X300? Yeah, something like that. It's Versys 300 as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, as you can see, I've lifted it back up to its standard height, which we have the adjustable lowering links on there. So it's just a matter of shortening those back up to the stock length, and that raise the rear end back to its normal position. I lowered the forks in the triple tree so that the front was the correct ride height. So basically now the ride height is pretty much stock. I also disassembled the forks. Actually, didn't really disassemble them. I took them apart from the top, and I installed some Race Tech, the heaviest springs they had for Versys 300. In there and I cut some shims for 10 millimeters of preload. That's their recommendation. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try it with the heavy springs and the stock fork oil. I think it's probably a 5-weight. And we'll see how that works off-road. I have a couple quarts of 10-weight fork oil that I'll swap out that oil if the damping isn't what it should be with those stiffer springs. I've ordered the YSS shock for the rear, but it seemed to take forever and a day to get one. I installed the Barkbuster brand handguards with the aluminum frames. Previously, we just had the standard plastic OEM style, not really handguards, just wind deflectors. So now we've got some actual handguards on here with the Storm wind deflectors. I had these on my Versys 650 and they work great. I've ordered a set of mirrors to replace these, although these work great, but if we're going to go off-road, I'd rather have the double take mirrors on here if we're going to see some more off-road activities, just so we can fold them out of the way and or remove them, or that maybe they're a little more indestructible than these standard mirrors. Either way, I have seen issues where these turn signals struggle a bit off-road. They completely fall out of the mounts. We'll see what happens. If that happens, we'll address that then, maybe with some smaller, lighter LEDs, and mount them up with some 3D printed adapters so that they don't just flop around. I'm actually going to remove these yellow aux lights, and I have some factory brackets to put here and some new aux lights to install. I'll show you those in a second. We've put the aftermarket exhaust on, the skid plate. It had the crash guards on it. We've got the Shinko 804, 805s. It's got Oxford heated grips. It's got the ram ball mount for the windshield. It's 80% there for being a lightweight adventure bike. So I'm gonna, do a few more modifications and it'll be 100% there. So some of the things we're gonna do here, one of the things that I want to talk about is the clutch. I've never ever been a fan of the feel of the clutch on the Versys 300. I think they may have went overboard in making it too easy. It just has no feedback, no feel. It's so light that just the slightest tension on the cable could cause a clutch to slip. So because of that, I ordered some Barnett Heavy Duty springs and 3 Barnett friction plates to go behind the 2 judder plates that are in the stock Kawasaki clutch. This clutch only has, and I'm guessing this bike may have 3,000 miles on it. Don't know. So I'm not going to worry about replacing the metal plates and or the 2 judder clutch plates. Just the 3 friction plates with the heavier springs. Also going to unbolt the rubber pads off the stock foot pegs and attach these SRC foot peg adapters. Got the OEM brackets here for mounting aux lights and these lights. Got the gasket for the clutch cover side. Made me a template to poke the hole or the bolts in as I take them out. I'm not sure if they're all the same length or not, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. We'll figure that out as we're going. And you know, that's the plan for today. So let's get going. Okay, first step's going to be to take off the stock Kawasaki rubber, and I believe this weight for vibration probably comes off as well. Anyway, let's get it disassembled, and then we'll read the instructions, because, you know, why read the instructions first? That just makes no sense. See if we get the camera to focus. Basically a sandwich type setup to go on the foot peg there. So let's look at the instructions here and see what SRC says about installing these pegs. They give you 4 new bolts, washers, and flange nuts. The peg itself is also threaded, so I'm assuming the flange nut is more of a locking device, right? So you're going to thread the bolts up through and into this peg, and then that nut's going to tighten down and go against those threads and create sort of a locking situation. So yeah, let's try that. That's really nice. I like it. I think I'm going to go ahead and put some Loctite on these, even though it may not need them. I really want this ball out, right? Okay. Okay, other than tightening those up, that's all there is to that. That might be the easiest swap you ever do on foot pegs, that's for sure. Let's look for a socket, because there's not much room there for a wrench. So I'm taking those up into the peg. Remember, the peg is threaded, so now I'm going to hold the bolt and tighten the nut down against that, which creates kind of a locking scenario. Yeah, I'm going to put that guy in there. I'll take it. Yeah, it's a pretty wrench. Wow, almost not enough for a wrench. You could have done a little better job, I think, on placement with that hole. I'm not sure how you're supposed to tighten that up. Let's see if a 1/4-inch drive has a thin enough wall to get inside there. I'll show you what I'm talking about. You see how close that is to this. So yeah, not much room. All right, 1/4 drive, people. I think this is it. Let's see. Yep. And yeah, 1/4 drive fits in there. Perfect. scratching my paint. Oh no, my garage floor paint has a scratch. Oh yeah, so that's a good fit. So you'll have to use a 1/4-inch drive set to tighten that up. And I have Loctite on these, so just gonna snug them up good. I'm sure you guys out there that are crazy about torque specs might, want to use a torque wrench. Well, there you go. Hop onto the other side and repeat, and we'll have some off-road foot pegs that quick. All right, so there's that. That was quick. Hopefully the clutch goes just as easily, right? Those look pretty good. Look like they'll be just aggressive enough, but not too crazy. And a little bit more surface area for standing. So now, onto the clutch. Oh no. So instead of draining the oil is actually fairly new. Probably has less than 200 miles on it. I did dirt bike style. I mean, when you've got a excess amount of Amazon boxes, you just lay the bike on the boxes and go from there. So enough of the oil should be on the other side of the motor, which should allow me to pop off this clutch cover without any loss of oil. We'll see how that goes. So it looks like we're going to have to, I had to remove the seat because this piece has to come off. One bolt here, one bolt here. I'm sure everything else is just pressed in. We'll probably have to remove the brake lever. Obviously the clutch cable. But I think that's about it. Hopefully we can get away with tapping this with a rubber mallet or a dead blow mallet. You get it to break loose. But yeah, let's get going. So I could either remove this bolt, the pivot point for the brake, or I think I can disconnect the rear master cylinder, and that will allow this to go down enough so that I can get this off. Let's see how that works out. Is that going too well? Yeah. You roll, you should see what we'll see. It goes back in a little bit, so I know where to go. You disconnect the clutch cable now. And I better take the spring off too. I'll get that guy down out of the way. Yeah, looks like everything's accessible. So grab some wrenches and get that clutch cable off. Okay. Now I think we can just do some removal of some bolts here. Yep. Need my trusty cardboard template. Looks like so far they're all about the same length. So, for those of you watching that may be doing this, all the bolts are the same length. Although doing this kind of Allows you to keep track of where the little wire keepers go. I'm going to shove some paper towels underneath right here just in case there's residual oil. Came off clean. Dowels here, dowels there, somewhat tight. Got a fair amount of grease in there still, that's good. No oil leakage, just grab some more paper towels and wipe some things down here. Give you an idea how these clutches work if you're not familiar. So you saw the clutch cable comes down from up top and is connected to this arm. When you pull your clutch in, it pulls this arm towards the boss here where the cable is, right? So you're pulling the clutch, and when you pull the clutch, I don't know if you can see it, but how that's shaped right there, that groove is going to grab a hold of this little knob here, and it's going to pull out and release pressure on the clutch plates, allow the clutch basically to slip. Gasket actually looks pretty good. I may put a little sealant from like here around up to here, a little Yama Bond, I don't know, when I put it back together. Anyway, let's go ahead and pop apart the clutch pack. And don't think we'll need this, or this anymore, so let's put these away. Loosening these clutch spring bolts. Probably should have put it in gear. Make sure it's loosening. Washers I'm going to worry about. Set that here. No washers on clutch springs. We'll set these up here, compare them to the Barnett springs. And let's see. Yeah, so we should be able to pull this out. I'd like the jug plates to stay, please. Thank you. There you go. Look at that surface. That looks pretty good. Nothing abnormal there at all. I'm going to leave the oil on that surface because there needs to be the oil there anyway. And which reminds me, I actually need to soak the new plates in some oil. So let's go ahead and pop these guys out. I'm going to get some paper towels and line. You know what? Maybe, will this work? Oh yeah, this might work. We'll take these out and lay them down in order. So we put them back the same way. First plate's always a friction plate. And then metal plate. Another friction plate. Notice this metal plate is slightly different than the rest of them, and it goes between the two outer, I guess you might want to call them judder clutch plates, but it's part of the the slipper clutch that Kawasaki has designed for this. This clutch plate, or this steel plate here, actually engages this this basket cover, whereas the rest of them engage the basket itself. Interesting, huh? So yeah, it goes in between the first two plates, and the first two plates are actually different as well. They're different thickness. I'll show you here in a minute. Okay. So this bearing goes in your basket, your hub basket cover here. And the reason it needs a bearing is because this section spins, right? And this thrust bearing, if that's basically what this is a thrust bearing, this is the piece that your clutch lever is pulling out on, right? As you pull your clutch lever, it tightens the cable, which I showed you inside the cover there. It's going to be engaged here, and that arm is going to pull this out. And what that does is raise this up and release the pressure that the springs are applying on the clutch pack. It allows the clutch to slip. As you release your clutch, this slowly goes in, unless you dump the clutch. This slowly goes in and engages, and that's where your friction area is on your clutch, right? They're always talking about the friction point for new riders like that. You want to get a feel for where that clutch starts to engage so that it's more predictable when you take off. And anyway, that's how that works. So the little arm inside the clutch cover engages. I don't know if you can see. Let me grab the camera and get you a little closer here. Might help. Wipe your hands off. First, let's look at this guy, right? So here's your obviously it would go this way. So if you look at the way that that slot is designed, once I get to a certain point, you see how it's half right there? There's a light getting in there. So it's going to engage that piece that's sticking out from the thrust bearing right there and pull it around. And now as you pull on your clutch cable, see this is pulling, releasing, it's actually engaged in these grooves right here, and it pulls it out. Of course, there's a bearing right here. The hub needs to spin, so there's a bearing that's taking up, the different axial play here. And then as you pull your lever, your clutch lever, that arm pulls this out, releases the pressure on the clutch pack, and allows your clutch to slip. Pretty simple, really. So when someone smokes their clutch, what they're talking about is all these little these are the friction areas of the clutch. They're slightly raised. I don't know that you can see them. Maybe you can. Higher than the rest of the clutch here. This is the part that actually grips the metal plates that are in between them, right? You're squeezing this, and what that does, it transfers power from this outside basket, which is directly connected to your crankshaft right here, to this inside, which is connected to your transmission. So this is how we get power from crank to transmission, right through the clutch. So if you smoke your clutch, you basically wear all these raised portions of the friction area down to nothing, and there's not enough clutch left to grab, right? So because the overall thickness of all these clutch plates, if they're worn, is going to get thinner and thinner, and they're just the spring pressure, no matter how great it is, it's not going to have enough pressure to properly engage the clutch and transfer the power to the transmission. Let's open up the Barnett clutch plates and springs and see what kind of a difference we got here. Okay, right off the bat, let's make sure that these are the right clutch friction plates. Here are the Barnett, here are the OEM. Basically, they need to be the same size on the outside with the same size teeth here. Yep, looks like it. So right away, you can see the Barnett, which is this one, has larger friction a larger friction area than the OEM. I don't know how that's going to be as far as clutch engagement. We'll find out. But so I'm going to put 3 of these in to replace 3 of these guys. And I'll still use the 2 smaller OEM clutch plates on the outside with the that's built in as far as part of the slipper clutch. So I'm going to have to soak these in oil for a little bit though. So we'll do that. And while that's happening, we'll take a break. We can talk a little bit about, you know, the term slipper clutch, right? Everybody's always talking about slipper clutch. Slipper clutch. What's that? What's that? I don't know. If you see there's these ramps on here, right? On both sides, a ramp here and a ramp here. Let's pop that bearing out before we bounce it off of something. And a ramp here and a ramp here and a ramp here and a ramp here. So there are ramps machined into this inner hub here, which remember is directly connected to the transmission, right? So what happens here, let's put this together. We have a slipper clutch, and this section is allowed to spin a little bit via these oblong holes in the clutch springs. Normally these holes wouldn't be oblong. These would fit right onto these posts without a, you know, if you didn't have a slipper clutch. And so what happens there is, let's say you downshift too far and you just dump the clutch. So instead of locking up the rear wheel and sliding, the transmission is going to apply force on those ramps, which is going to push this basket out, right? So if I could grab the back wheel right now and turn it, you would see that it would force this out like that. And by doing that, just like that. And by doing that, it's releasing pressure on the clutch pack and allowing the clutch to slip. That way, the engine, what do you want to call the decel, right? You're gonna, if normally you would downshift too far, dump the clutch, you would be fighting the engine, and you'd lock up your wheel and slide around. This is going to prevent that because it's going to allow the clutch to slip and allow the engine RPMs to, you know, reduce at a normal rate. I don't know if any of you have tested it, but it's interesting to test. Just downshift too far on purpose and let the clutch out and watch what happens. Be careful though. But anyway, yeah, so that's how it works, right? Slipper clutch. The back tire tries to spin the engine, and by doing that, it releases pressure on the clutch pack and allows the back tire to freewheel versus trying to fight the engine. That's the best explanation I got. That probably worked actually. So yeah, there's your slipper clutch. So yeah, let me put those pads in some oil, and we'll put this back together. A little soak for probably 10 minutes or so. Oh, we wanted to look at springs before we go, huh? OEM spring, Barnett spring. You can see it's a little taller, right? I mean, without a tool to measure, I really can't feel any difference. I'm sure there is a difference. For one, there's more preload because it's taller. But yeah, you would literally need a spring compression tool to measure the spring tension to see the difference. I mean, maybe, hopefully I'll feel the difference in the clutch lever itself, because the lightness of the clutch lever is one of the things I dislike. But anyway, let's soak some fiber pads in some oil and put this guy back together. Yeah, a little KTM oil should work, right? Yeah. Make sure these guys come apart. There we go. Let them soak for a little bit, and we'll go from there. There, that might work. There we go. So anyway, there's the groove that fits in that plunger, right? And you can see that ledge right there is going to come this way and pull it out when I pull. So pulling on the clutch pulls that plunger out, which releases the pressure on the clutch pack. So when you're putting it back together, it's important to put it together about like this and work this guy forward as you're pushing it on. to make sure you engage the plunger properly, right? Okay, so hopefully that helps. One thing I wanted to do make sure was that the friction plates, that the Barnett friction plates and the OEM friction plates, since these are new, it's pretty safe to measure the thickness here and see what we come up with. Looks like 1117, which is exactly what the Barnett plates are. So we're good to go in that regard. Sometimes aftermarket clutch plates require you to buy their actual metal plates as well, because the metal plates may be a different thickness. If the overall thickness of the clutch pack is off, you may have some goofy or inoperable clutches. Something to think about if you're doing this. Okay, it's time to serve up some clutch soup. Just kidding. So we're going to start with a friction plate, and then a metal plate, and then a friction plate. Remember, I'm replacing the first 3 friction plates with the Barnett Heavy Duty clutch plates. There's one, and here's one. So I'll set this guy over here. We're not going to use him. Then a metal plate, and so there is an in and an out on these metal plates. Does it matter which way they go? Depends on who you ask, but you can see that one edge is rolled, the other one is flat. I always put the flat side in. Then the 2 OEM outside plates with the funky plate that engages the outer basket, or the basket cover rather. And then the last friction plate. Okay, like I said earlier, that getting this outer cover lined up might be interesting. Sometimes interesting sucks. We'll see. So we have to get the ramps lined up, then we have to twist this and get it to engage this metal, this last outer metal plate, which, remember, the rest of them have engaged the center section, but this one engages this guy. So let's see what we can do here. There we go. So it's all the way in. I can feel the pressure against the plates here if I push. Yeah, there's no play in that. So the clutch pack is lined up and ready to go. So yeah, it takes a little finagling to get that to line up. So keep that in mind. You can't just throw it together. Aftermarket clutch springs are over here. Some of you guys that bend or break your shift shaft from the other side, I can show you real quick what's involved in swapping that out. You'll have to do everything I did on this clutch and more. I should have showed you the retaining. There's a retaining nut that keeps this basket on place, because you're going to have to get underneath here. But see this guy right here? This is part of your shifting mechanism. It goes down and around, and the rod goes across right here, and there's a retaining spring. Let's find that flashlight. Where's that darn flashlight? Here it is. So anyway, yeah, you can see right there. There's the spring, the centering spring for the shifting system around that post. Right down there is your shaft that goes all the way through the transmission out the other side, and your shift lever is connected to it. And as you move it up and down, it pulls back and forth right here on the shift drum, which moves your forks inside your transmission. So if you bend or break your shift shaft, you're going to have to remove the clutch like I did, and then even further, you're going to have to take the nut off of the center, which sometimes requires a special tool. Slide this part of the basket off so that you can slide the shift shaft out. And you can slide that whole mechanism out and slide the new one in. Probably should replace the seal on the other side if you're doing this. Yeah, so that's what you do if you break your shift shaft. There is another point of failure on these. The little detent for the shift drum is right there with the blue paint on the spring. That locks the shift drum into position as you put it into each gear. There's been a few people, I guess, that have broken, or somehow that spring has broken, and the shift drum just kind of freewheels around and doesn't actually stay in gear, pops out of gear, won't go into neutral, etc. So it could be that spring is broken. I like to show you guys this stuff because I hear the ridiculous amount of money that some shops are charging to do this work, and it's really just not that hard. It just takes a little time. Someone said that their local Kawasaki shop wanted $1,200 to replace these the clutch pack. So new friction plates and steel plates. I want to guess those are around $7 a piece, and there were what, 5? And that's it. So 5 metal, 5 friction. And you saw how easy it was to get it apart. Really, they want $1,200 to do that? I mean, come on. I know they got to make a living. I was a mechanic as well, and I did okay as far as money. But $1,200? Good Lord, that's, you know, what is this bike probably worth? $4,000? Maybe $5,000? I don't know. That's ridiculous. But anyway, that's why I like showing you guys how to do this stuff and throwing it out there on YouTube. So let's go ahead and put this back together. When you're tightening these clutch spring bolts, you know, kind of do like 2 or 3 turns at a time on each one, work your way around. You're basically going to tighten these down until they bottom out, and then put the correct amount of torque on them. I'll have to look that up and bust out my torque wrench because I don't know what it is. It'll be the same torque of the bolts that hold the side case on, the same size bolt. Although they do have a little 8 on them, grade 8 bolt. But they're still threaded into aluminum, so don't get nuts with the torque. Use the spec and no more. So they're bottomed out. And let's look up the torque. Looks like they're 104 inch-pounds. This is an inch-pound guy, so let's go from there and see what happens. See how 104 inch-pounds feels. I think that's about 8.8 foot-pounds, something like that. Make sure this is clean. I'm going to go ahead and reuse this gasket, I think. It came apart pretty well, and I don't feel a single place where oil should or would leak through. I am going to clean up the cover and put a little Bond 4 on the lower half, possibly. Maybe all the way around. I don't know. Really thin layer. Now we have to position this arm so that it properly engages the plunger there as we push it on. Make sure this dowel is cleaned out. Don't need any ammo bond in there. Flat edge there. Help get that one up. Wipe off the excess Yama lube, or Yama bond rather, sorry, before it. Time to put the bolts back in, eh? Just kind of start at the bottom. Not really tighten these, but that way, make sure that paper towel's not caught up in there. That way it's kind of, you know, gaskets being compressed from the bottom up. Just finger tightening these anyway, so. Not really a structural piece, so torque sequence probably isn't as important, if at all. Okay. And that's that. You do adjust the free play on this guy. So I'm going to go up there and give me a little bit of adjustment up there, and then I'm going to loosen this so that I've got some free play on the cable. Really important on this bike to have the proper free play on the clutch cable because, like I said earlier, the clutch pull is so light that even a slightly tight clutch cable will cause you to slip, your clutch to slip, and eventually it'll destroy your clutch. Some quirky things about this bike. The chain tension for the rear drive, for example, on this bike, for some reason, maybe it's this, well, it's not for some reason, it's the geometry of the location of the front sprocket, rear sprocket, and how it changes as the suspension compresses. But this chain gets a lot tighter than most bikes as the suspension compresses. It's normal for the chain to get tight when the suspension compresses, but this one seems to get tighter than normal, if that makes any sense. So you always want to make sure that you do your drive chain adjustment on this bike on the loose end, you know, with no weight on the bike. If you get it too tight with no weight on the bike and you put your butt on there, and if it's a big fat butt like mine, and gear, your chain's going to be way too tight. This bike, there's reports on, you know, various forums and groups they adjusted their chain, and all of a sudden it sounds like a four-wheel drive going down the road. That's because the chain's too tight, and you're putting a lot of stress on the output bearing, on the transmission itself. And there's been some people that have actually fried their transmission doing that. So be careful. Make sure your chain is loose. Loose chains are happy chains. Okay, where are we now? Need to make sure or figure out how that spring was mounted on this guy, because it kind of just fell off. Kind of wiggling this brake lever up and down with my knee while I'm tightening these bolts up. Make sure everything goes into position like it should. Even that goofy spring. She's weird. I'll have to look up the torque on these guys. Gonna say they're probably 14 to 15 foot-pounds, but just to be safe, let's look it up. I think we're gonna go with 16 foot-pounds. Everybody good with that? 16? So that's adjusted, that's done, that's good, that's attached. Everything's torqued, everything inside's torqued. This is lined up, feels good on the clutch lever. And we have a little tiny bit of squeeze out of Yamabon, which is good. That's what we need. Make sure it's sealed. And I think, yeah, we can put the plastic on now. These things, putting these back on, these little nipples into these little rubber grommets without pushing the rubber grommet through, sometimes can be a pain in the ass. So, yeah, I'm going to put a little oil on each one of these. Just a little bit. That's much better than putting it on dry, that's for sure. Little lube goes a long ways. Okay, cool. Got the bolts. Cables adjusted and tightened. I think we're done. Stand the bike back up and see how the clutch feels. One thing I love about this bike, it doesn't weigh anything. Literally, you just grab it, flip it up. I swear, my Himalayan feels like it weighs 150 pounds more than this bike, but it doesn't. It's only maybe 50 pounds more. clutch still feels pretty light, but you know, it's better than it was. Show you how I like to see these clutches in regards to clutch cable play. I like to be able to move it at least that far without any resistance. So that's between 1/8 and 1/4 right there. You know, and then check it at full throw. In both directions to make sure you have some free play. I might, you know what? I might give it some more. Usually I like to have this facing down because water goes right into your cable. Yeah, feels good. I think I'm going to pop the cable off and lube it. That should be enough. Close this up so we don't spill. And start working this guy back and forth. Squeeze the bag a little bit, maybe force the oil down in. Oil's going somewhere. Let's go see if it's coming out down below. Any oil yet? Not yet. I mean, oil's going somewhere. I'm going to say it's going down the cable. Oh yeah. So now I'm just going to pop this off. Like that. Let's wipe that. I saw a drip. Can't have drips. This bike has bar risers on it. I think maybe with full right turn. No, I'm going to say it might be putting pressure on the cable, but it's not. Open the garage door a little bit. It's funny how tall this bike is when it's Okay, let's put it in gear and see what happens. Hopefully we don't lurch forward and take off through the house. Yeah. So the clutch feels about the same as it did. Maybe a little stiffer. We'll have to ride it, let it break in and see how it feels. But yeah, so there we go. Barnett clutch springs and clutch plates installed, as well as the SRC Footpeg adapters. That seat concept seat is pretty nice. Anyway, hopefully I can put together a video that can help someone do this in the future, even if you're just replacing a stock clutch, so you can use this video as a reference. Like I said, I'd heard reports of dealers charging $1,000 to do that, or upwards of $1,200. Give it a shot. Just be careful. Look up your torque specs. And I guess most of all, if you don't feel comfortable doing it at all, then pay someone to do it. Anyway, I hope you guys liked the video, and if you did, thumbs up, and maybe I'll see you out there.